jury's in, the courtroom of sales is set to begin. Truth on trial, hear the gavel groan. Let's lay the facts, don't go it alone. Under oath, under oath, under oath. You gotta say it clear. The truth, the whole truth, ringing in our ear. Sales persuasion, sure, but honesty's the goal. Under oath, that's how we roll.
Welcome to Under Oath, the only podcast where top sales professionals take to the stand to reveal their winning strategies, battle-tested tactics, and their secrets to building an unstoppable sales team. Let's meet the defense. Representing executive leadership, it's Zach Ramey, head of revenue at Rankings.io. Standing in for the defense of enablement and operations, it's me, Scott Knudson, director of revenue ops at Rankings. And last, it's certainly not least, leading the defense of frontline sellers and managers, the ringer, Cole Castleberry, head of sales at Rankings. Together, we're going to be cross-examining the best in the business, challenging conventional wisdom, and uncovering what truly drives success in sales. Gentlemen, court is in session.
Happy to be here.
I need to get a gavel. That will really send
Do need to get a gavel, at least a sound effect.
Welcome, new listeners to the show. We're really excited. This first episode is going to be a little bit different than the rest of the season.
So what you're saying is everybody's a new listener.
Everyone. Welcome to everyone. Normally, we're going to have a theme. All of us are going to have kind of a hot take on that theme, especially our guests, and we'll kind of cross-examine and go into that theme in more in depth. But since, as a new listener, you don't know any of us really and who we are, figure a good, our opening statements for this episode, we're going to talk just a little bit about this podcast, what to expect, and a little bit about us, our history, and what gives us the credibility to talk about sales and give some amount of advice for it. So I want to talk, I'll start with you, Zach. This is kind of your brainchild. Where did Under Oath come from? What's the inception here?
I'll give me and Cole credit for the brainchild. Cole and I have been together in the workforce for going on what, Cole, 6-7 years at this point. And we met through work, which is pretty cool. He was one of the first people I ever hired at my last company, or I guess our last company. And a lot of ideas has stemmed from me and Cole on many days, many lunches, many Frisbee golf outings. And we've always wanted to start a podcast. In today's age, that's the thing to do, to kind of get your thought leadership out, get things that you really, you care about, you're passionate about. So once we got together at Rankings and, met you, Scott, with background in podcasting, and, our CEO, Chris Dreyer, runs a podcast and does it well. I think it was finally time. We're all in positions to share some insights. We've all come up the ranks at different companies and made it far in our professional careers at a relatively young age. So I think that, like the title kind of stands for, Under Oath is, all of our opinions might not be the right ones for you, but we're going to tell the truth about ours.
The truth, the whole truth.
Nothing but the revenue truth.
I love that. Sounds like the tea leaves were there. Lots of signs pointing us. Just start the podcast, guys.
Yeah.
Cole, it sounds like you've been following Zach around for a little bit. You guys, I know you also live close to each other. What's that been like working with Zach? Are you guys kind of always coming up with ideas like this? Is this the first of its kind?
Yeah, very far from first of its kind. We've been in the workforce for several years. Even when we were at separate roles or separate companies, there was always still ideas flowing back and forth. We talked daily, helped each other in different roles, helped spearhead other projects and initiatives. I think all three of us here are creatives at heart, and it just felt natural to get on here and speak our truth about sales or whatever subjects to come.
Zach, obviously we have different backgrounds. In your mind, who's the target listener for Under Oath? Who's going to get the most value out of this, you think?
Yeah. I think for this side of the podcast and talking about revenue and rev ops and sales, it's really anyone in that field. I know that's kind of a broad answer, but I truly believe that. I think we're still at the age and young enough in our careers that we can speak to that BDR, SDR, and help them and show them ways to stand out and be great at the little things that truly matter. I think we are deep into building out a revenue and sales department and revenue ops department that we can really talk to people that are trying to do that themselves. Our losses we've had, our failures, our wins, our successes. I feel like we've done a lot in our time together, going on a year and a half just at rankings. I hope that we get to learn from other people when we have guests on here because, we're far from perfect. So we want to be able to learn and implement stuff here at rankings that helps us grow.
I think we have an interesting perspective where most of us come from a sales background to some extent. And what all of us have a different lens into the revenue team that we're growing, whether that's kind of on the operations enablement side of things where I sit, or whether you're Cole, who's kind of on the front lines with the sellers, with the AEs, with the BDRs, or whether there's someone like you, Zach, who's at the desk with the CEO, with the C-suite, kind of more from that executive purview. We want to approach it from top to bottom so that, yeah, if you're an individual contributor, great. This is a lens into how the three of us who might stand in for those types of roles at your company might be thinking about a given problem or question. And hopefully there's kind of takeaways from you. And then on the flip side, I like what you said there, Zach, where if you're trying to build this, right, if you are a leader, what better way than to look at other leaders in the space? What did they try? What worked? What didn't work? So yeah, so I think it's going to be good.
I think it's important for people to understand that when you talk about just one thing, a lot of things get left out. If you talk just about building a strong revenue department and the software that you're buying, whatever it may be, the BDRs, SDRs, AEs get left out of the conversation, right? And the point of this with our 3 different seats that we sit in, all voices are accounted for. All avenues are looked at, every angle. This conversation is about building a good ecosystem, not just a singular department inside of a revenue channel.
Yeah, love that. Cole, we've talked a lot offline about guests. Any insight into kind of who do you think, who can the listeners expect guest wise to bring on, and what's your thought there? What's kind of our goal for that?
I think at its core, we're in revenue, right? We're in sales. So I think professionals within a space is a natural conversation to have. But I also think that we are also unique in our takes. I would love to hear from outside perspectives. Maybe it's somebody who works for a completely adjacent company to what we do, but they do something at a high level. I just want to learn from people, and hear the truths about what makes things work well within an organization. And it doesn't have to be singularly sales focused. But let's also not lie. We are sales professionals, so you'll hear a lot about sales.
Yeah. I remember we were at our conference called PIMCon, and there was a speaker named John Barry. He gave this presentation that really captured me. He's a lawyer, and he kind of put together his own firm, but you would have thought he was a 10-year sales CRO. The way that how he talked about running his sales team, like bringing in leads, it was so sales focused. And it kind of dawned on me. It's like, there's all these people across all these companies, these different verticals. There's this one constant that at the end of the day, you got to bring dollars in the door. You got to find leads. You got to nurture those leads. You got to convince them that the product you're selling is worth it. And you got to get them to give you their credit card. So I think hopefully we can provide some insight from not only our history, but the revenue team that we're building at Rankings. And then, bringing in lots of other insights, our industry, other industries, really any expert that can bring an interesting take and perspective to the space. All right, before we get into the topic for the day, I wanted to just really quickly, each of us take just a couple minutes and speak to a little bit of our history, what got us to the spot we're in now, where our backgrounds come from, the strengths and kind of the interesting circumstances that we've been in, the parts of our career that are interesting and might be relevant to a listener being like, why should I listen to what Zach says or Cole says or Scott says? Let's start with you, Zach. We'll tell the under oathers, the listeners a little bit about Zach. What got you to this heavy revenue position that you're at now?
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure everybody can already tell I have a country accent, and I am from a small town called Pikeville in Kentucky. Moved to Lexington, Kentucky at a young age. I think at least a couple of us on this call didn't attend college, and I am definitely in that category. So got my start at a factory making Dixie cups. So if you ever, go to the dentist and wash your mouth out with some of their Listerine, I might have made a cup back in the day. Knew early on that's not where I wanted to have my career. I always had a knack for tech. I was the guy that everybody in the family calls to come fix their phone or laptop or whatever it may be. So I got on AT&T for a little while, about 3 years. Moved up to management there, and then went to a software company called Thrive, a publicly traded company, and I was there for 7 years. Started out as an AE, essentially door knocking, cold calling. That's where I cut my teeth for true business to business sales. Then got promoted to a market manager where me and Cole met at the company at BNI. If you're not familiar with BNI, it's just like a referral networking group. Got promoted to market manager there, then went to a sales director, moved to Washington, D.C. for a couple years. They were starting a SaaS side of their company, handled a book of business between 15 and 20 million, about 16 reps. That's probably where I learned my absolute most, right? Under a RVP there, his name's Fran Lee, awesome mentor for me. Then came here to Rankings, found by Chris through a third-party recruiting company, and was given the opportunity to become VP of sales. And after about a year, promoted to technical title, Senior Vice President of Revenue. Head of revenue is just easier to say for us. But at the end of the day,
before we hop into Cole, I think this last year at Rankings is a great little notch in the belt. Tell the listeners a little bit about what you've been able to accomplish in the last year and a half.
Yeah, it's been an awesome ride. I truly believe one day that we're going to look back and I'm going to tell my kids about how this last year went, because it's been a rocket ship for us. It's cool to be living it. When I got hired in October of 2023, the company did $7.6 million in 2023. There were 2 AEs, technically 1.5 that year because one came on later in the year. Ended up going in to 2024 with just 1 AE at the beginning. So lost one and then had to start looking to build out a team. But in 2024, we did 16.5 million. So, I mean, we over doubled year over year. Cole was my first hire. On my first day, I called and asked him if he would come. Cole, you'll get into his background, but very strong and outbound. And I'll let him walk through his background is for that. But I mean, Cole built out a team that was phenomenal. Our CEO came to me. We were spending, Rankings mid 5 figures on an outbound team, 7% show rate, 0 closes. I mean, abysmal numbers, something that just wasn't going to help the company grow. We're just catching money on fire. When we originally came in, Chris said, if y'all can get 2 to 3 deals for a couple $100,000, this is a success. And to Cole's credit, has a great group of talent that followed him here. They did 32 or 33 sales last year for a little over $4 million, and that catapulted us. Obviously, to double revenue, we had to have another arm that was strong. I think we averaged an 83% show rate, which is unbelievable for any industry. That was a catapult. Scott, you came in not too long after Cole, and it's been a nice little tripod here, little match made in heaven that's really taken us to where we're at. So,
we'll punch in a little more on that for sure. Cole, I want to get you guys were 2 different ships who eventually kind of converged. Tell us a little about your background, how you ended up here.
Absolutely. We'll start with the stuff that matters, which is when the professional career started. My first sales role outside of retail was door-to-door selling for Aflac, walking straight into businesses, commission only, just the grind, right? You had
brutal.
To kill it was brutal, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot about sales and grit and who I wanted to be through that, which led me to my introduction to Zach and that career. As Zach said, we met at a BNI. Zach actually attended a BNI at 7 a.m, which is I was a member of. If you knew something about Zach at that time, 7 a.m. BNIs were not a common occurrence.
There was no reason I should have been there, Scott.
So
we
connected over
7 a.m. That's
God himself knew I needed Cole in my life. That's why I ended up at BNI.
Yes, must have been fate. I stood up that day and asked for one of Zach's top clients, a local company in Lexington, Kentucky, that he just happened to have a relationship with. So we started networking, passing business back and forth, would meet up for coffee just to kick it and to pass some business. Became good friends through that. Eventually, Zach was like, "Hey, would you ever be interested in Thrive?" At the time, I was pretty happy in what I was doing, or so I thought I was, until I got into the software space. And then I realized, oh, this is what sales can be and where potential can lie. So I worked my way up at Thrive. Eventually, I got poached to work for another company called Bird Eye. It's a reputation management company in which I headed up their sales and worked a lot outbound in that division. And then, in part, got me here to Rankings to scale this side.
Yeah. And it's been awesome to see. I came in not long after, and Cole kind of brought in a bunch of his aces from a couple spots before. It's been awesome to see that kind of loyalty where people are like, hey, when there's a spot, you let me know. I'm ready to jump. Wherever you're going, Cole, like, I want to go. I only know a handful of managers who've been able to get that kind of loyalty, which is really cool to see. And yeah, everyone who has come in, especially kind of through your network, has just dominated. Obviously, we had this killer 2024. I'll give an abbreviated version. I also cut my teeth young. When I was 17, my brother-in-law was managing like an alarm sales company. And he was like, hey, Scott, you should come out with me. And I was like, all right, sure. And so at 17, I'm a junior in high school. I don't even know how. I convinced my parents to let me just like not finish the school year and go out and sell door to door in Oakland, selling alarm systems as this like dumb 17-year-old. Really dangerous. It was like the fact that like I saw things I shouldn't have seen at 17, but I learned a lot about selling and persevering through hard times. It's a pretty commission heavy role. Fast forward after playing in my early 20s and you know, having fun, needed to make a career. And so I'd sold phones for a while, like you, Zach. And I thought, hey, you know what? Like I should go work for a tech company. So I applied at Adobe thinking like I've sold door to door. I've sold phones. I'm qualified for this job. And I'm sure this poor hiring manager was like, sweet Scott, appreciate the gumption. But he pointed me to, there was a company called Inside Sales. He's like, we hire a lot from here. Go really cut your teeth in software there. So I came in there through a BDR, did that for about a year and a half, then went through a typical AE process, was in sales for about 10 years. Went to a couple of presidents clubs. You know, I worked at Lucid. I worked at Divvy, which is now Bill. I worked at a company called Close, a company called Rever, all different software companies in the Valley, working my way up in sales. And then at a certain point, I moved from sales into sales enablement. I found a lot more fulfillment in teaching, providing resources, and that left brain creative side. For the last 5 or 6 years, that's where I've been, is kind of the enablement operations side. And that's been awesome. I've been able to make tons of friends in sales. It's kind of the perfect 1 foot in sales, 1 foot kind of in the operations leadership side. Because I just love sales. I think it's some of the best people in the world, and they're my favorite people to be around and to help. And being in the trenches for, you know, a decade, I knew what a good book and a bad book looked like. I knew what was fair and was unfair. And I really felt like I could be a champion to sales management and other departments in kind of an enablement operations role. You know, when a spot opened up at Rankings, kind of reached out to Zach directly and was like, hey, I think this might be a good fit actually. And yeah, kind of the rest is history,
as they say.
That's a little bit about us. Obviously, we could go into details about all these things, and I'm sure bits and pieces will come out through the course of the show. But wanted to give our listeners just a little bit of credibility that we have walked these streets before. We've seen success, especially recent success. Of course, we're not perfect. We're still learning things. What I think I love most about this podcast is that we are currently building this revenue motion, right? Like, it's not like we built it 10 years ago and we're writing a book about it. It's like, no, we're in the heat of it. And all these questions of like, should we have a dedicated inbound person? And what's the best call recording software? And how should we do this KPI? And what do we do in an acquisition? Like, we are in the thralls of it. I think our listeners, hopefully from contributors to leadership, can learn from the decisions we make. And those will be reflective in the themes and topics we choose, because they're typically the things that we're talking about week in, week out.
Yep.
Okay. So now in this part of the regular episode, we move into our cross-examination. This is an atypical episode because we're, getting to know, or our listeners getting to know us. But I wanted to give a little bit of a taste of what a typical Under Oath episode might feel like. So we picked a topic. We'll talk a little bit about it. The arguments for the bench or the cross-examination would go something like this. The theme is cold calling. Is it still irrelevant in 2025? And each of us are going to bring a hot take about that theme and give our case for why we think it is or isn't. So we're going to start with that. Zach, cold calling in 2025, is it still relevant?
I think that cold calling in 2025 in a mass produced way is dead, in my opinion. And that can just be for our vertical maybe, but I talk to a lot of people and it feels like it's hard to win that way. I think cold calling in a personalized manner is very much alive and thriving.
So if I'm hearing you right here, when you say in mass, you mean kind of like auto dialing.
I'm auto dialing, 300 dial days.
A day, but the flip side of that, like hyper personalized calls.
Yep.
Alive, thriving. Okay, cool. Cole, what about you? What's your hot take?
I think it's in a similar vein, but I would go a step further and say that cold calling sets the tone for all of the success you'll have to follow with a prospect. Having a actual conversation with somebody voice to voice is so much more impactful than over email or LinkedIn. A good conversation where people can hear your emphasis and understand what you're trying to say is so impactful today. I would agree that a mass approach to cold calling and I'm going to dial and have no personality behind it, it is a dead entity. But if you're strategic and you care about the thought that you're putting into each prospect, you'll make a lot of success with cold calling.
You said something there. I want to tap into that a little bit. You talked about just how different it is talking to somebody on the phone and what that does for them and also for you. Speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think people still seek connection, right? And it's hard to face that over a screen in today. I mean, we're all remote. We're recording this podcast from different rooms, right? Mm-hmm. But we're talking through it. If we're just texting this, no one's going to read this entire podcast, right? So it's the same thing when we're talking on the phone. There's a level of connection that happens. There's a level of certainty that you can bring through tonalities and conviction in what you're saying that people can't get via email or via text or via message. I think it really does still set the tone for a good relationship and a good foundation. Also, it's one of the hardest skills to have. It's just being a good conversationalist. So if you can do it live and on the spot, you can definitely do a good email and send a good follow-up message. But having an organic conversation will win you deals, will make you further in a prospect's journey.
Yeah, I love that. My hot take is similar to that. So I'll say what I was going to say, which connects to yours. Cold calling is really like sales conditioning. The process of calling is hard. You have this very high defensive wall you have to get over. Right. You have to constantly be thinking about, how do I get past a gatekeeper? How do I lower the defensive tendencies that people have? And that's really good for selling. That's good for the muscle that is sales, to be personable, to drive value, to get people to like you and to build a relationship so that you can persuade them to buy your service or product. That is not something that's easy. And especially if you're trying to sell something and get paid lots of money for it, you really need to learn that skill. These days, there are all these tools that say, hey, like, we'll email for you, we'll automate everything. You can't just generate. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people who would like to say you can generate a cold call, but a true cold call where you're the person who's sweating behind it, like, that's something that you need to learn. The process of learning how to do that and do it effectively makes you a better seller all across the board.
True cold calling and learning to prospect and speak that way with quality is the foundation to become an account executive, and a strong one.
Yeah, exactly. It can be easy to forget that it's like, oh, if I can just get enough sets, then I'll move into presenting and doing demos. A lot of sellers, that's the path they want to go on. But those interpersonal skills, those ability to someone throws an objection at you, like a tough one, if you haven't built those muscles to dodge and weave and navigate that conversation, you potentially ruin a deal, which is a lot more impactful. And so, yeah, you are only hurting yourself by avoiding or taking the easy route when it comes to cold calling, or in this case, not cold calling. I think the other thing that is worth pointing out, my hot take, is anything that converts is not dead. Cold calling converts. It just does. You can make the case that it's converting less, but it still converts. In sales, it's a numbers game. You are trying to maximize the amount of touches that you get. To say like, oh, well, cold calling is not as effective as it used to be, so let's just not do it, to me is the most insane position to take, because it converts and we see it all the time. Of course, we all prefer to be emailed, right? I hate getting phone calls. I'm sure both of you are the same. I do not represent everyone. And the fact is, we still get lots of sets and lots of deals and lots of closed deals where the original source of that deal was somebody picking up the phone and said, hey, Zach, I know I caught you between a meeting. You have a couple minutes. I want to tell you why I'm calling, right? That meeting would not have happened, through an email. That would just get buried in an email, and somebody else, some other, in our case, SEO focused or legal specific SEO firm could have called them and said, hey, you should talk to me instead, and cut straight to the front of the line. So in your case, Zach, where you talk about hyper personalization, I want to touch on that a little bit. Do you think that's the nature of things because of auto dialers, spam calling, and so many calls that people who personalize stand out in that way? Or do you think that's more reflective of kind of the way that AI and how it's being integrated into the world these days? People are looking for authenticity in any regard.
I think it's a combination of both, right? AI is obviously getting better and better, but spam has been awful for years. For me, at the end of the day, people love an experience, right? Like if you're going to call me, make it impactful, make me special. And that is our goal every day with our outbound team. It starts with list building, as Scott's very well aware of, having a great list. And then what do you know about those people? What information are you taking to them that you can really open their eyes, whether you do business with us or somebody else? Take this information and get better. Whether it's gifting something that we send them to try to do, that we, creep their Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn or whatever and find something special to give them. How do you stand out? I'm all about the experience. It's something we preach every day here at Rankings. People just want that they don't want to be auto dialed or spammed. Like, yeah, we've talked about it many times, but I can tell whenever I get auto dialed, you can say hello, and then you hear things in the background. Hello, is this Mr. Ramey? Like, and then that is just immediately a turnoff for me, right? But if you answer the phone and they're like, "Hey, Mr. Ramey, this is so and so and so," like, and they go straight into what a problem I have is, and it's fluid, I could tell that they spent some time. I'm still probably going to give them some time to speak to me. But when the second, that first 5 seconds, 2 seconds, I can hear it's an auto dial or something. And obviously I know it a little bit better than most, but I think everybody can feel that. It's very not genuine. Nowadays, more than ever, people want that, again, experience.
I think that's a great thing you just said about being genuine. And I think that's the majority of battle with cold calling is people feel like they have to have this script or narrative that they need to follow every single time to be efficient. I think the best conversations come from an organic place, right? Just have an authentic conversation, be genuine on the phone, bring something of value. It really is that simple.
Here's some hiring, my first ever hiring tip on Under Oath. Whenever you go and you're hiring for outbound, you want to hire a conversationalist, not people who want to see a script. Nowadays, I want somebody that can get me talking about me on an interview. If you can make that happen, I can teach you the product. I can teach you the knowledge of those things. If you can find a true conversationalist, because the people in my time that I've met that do not succeed is the ones who say, "Where's your script? Let me see the script. Let me see the script." It just doesn't work like that. You're not going to be able to use my script. Scott's Valley accent from all those companies he worked at isn't gonna work for some people. Each person is an individual. It's individualized, right? Find somebody who's a conversationalist, and that is what is so great about our team. They're good talkers. They can get you talking.
Yeah, one thing, something I used to always teach my new hires is just compare the difference between these two types of interactions. The first one is, "Hello, is this Zach? Hey, I probably caught you," but it's like automatically it's nervous. There's no confidence behind it, right? And compare that to something that doesn't have to be incredibly polished. But if I answer the phone, I say, Zach, I've been trying to get a hold of you for freaking 2 weeks, man. I'm so glad you answered.
Yep.
And you're like, "Oh, why?" It's like, you're the person at this company who I have this whole presentation I want to talk to you about, right? And all of a sudden, like, it's a totally different kind of conversation at that point, right? They can feel like they're important. They can feel like, yeah, I have been trying to get a hold of you for 2 weeks, right? And I'm thrilled that I got you and not your voicemail. It's okay to have, and people want that kind of realness. And so I think generally speaking, the more you lean towards like, this is the script, stick to the script, stick to the number, that tends to be indicative, I think, of a larger problem. And you talked about it, Zach, this idea of like, are you the one driving the conversation? Are you the one thinking, how do I get this person to open up and talk to me? Because once that happens, all bets are off. Your ability to get a set or anything you want changes dramatically once there's a conversation, right? As opposed to a time share presentation where, I'm just like, "Hey, have you heard of this? We do this. Would you like to meet with me?" It's like, no, I don't want to talk to you. Cole, in your experience, you work the closest with the BDRs, right? You've seen a lot of the ones who have been successful, the ones who have gone through the promotion path, the ones who have kind of maintained their top position. Where does cold calling fit in with them? What have you seen as opposed to the people who have been on the opposite end of that and kind of struggled more?
Yeah, I think it stays with the narrative that we talked through, right? It really builds the foundation of overcoming objections, powering through conversations, knowing where to go next in a call. When somebody's ready to listen to you, that conversation's a whole lot easier than when you're calling someone out of the blue, convincing them why they should listen to you. So I think those that have the framework of cold calling and have gotten good at convincing people why they should listen, when they're set in front of somebody who's ready, that conversation is just so much easier because the walls are down at that point and they're ready and they're receptive to what you're bringing in. you have that framework of being able to overcome hard objections and navigate somebody towards where your value is. One of the things that is most impactful on a cold call is not focusing on your value. Your value is getting an appointment, but that's not the other person's value. Their value is what matters when you approach them. They don't care about setting your appointment. They care about what you're bringing to the table. You have to bring something of value to them so they can choose to come to your table.
Hey, Colin, let's give them the secret of why that matters so much. What percentage is going to be indicative of whether it's your value or their value?
100%. It is the show rate on the end. If you
Ding,
set
ding,
on
ding,
your
ding, ding.
value, they will not show on that next call. You can leave as happy as you want saying, I got a set. But when it comes time to actually have that sales conversation, they're not there, right? And then you're playing the no-show, the chase game. But when you come to the table on that first interaction, you've brought something of value, something of need to them. They want to hear you out more. They want to show up for that second call. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. I think to wrap up our closing arguments, because normally we'd be getting just that much more into the weeds. We'd have another guest on giving it kind of their perspective. We'd be pressing each other back and forth. Let's leave our listeners with a final verdict or a closing statement. One core takeaway that you would give to somebody who is cold calling. That could be somebody who manages cold callers, or that could be somebody who is thinking, do I want to invest in cold calling as a methodology, as something that my team invests in? Zach, we'll start with you. It could be from your perspective and seat or whatever makes the most sense.
Yeah, I guess my advice would be if you have money set aside to start outbound cold calling and you're doing it from scratch, go hire somebody with experience. Don't make this an entry level role. We have found great success by going to companies and talking to people who's done it, been there, had success, and given them a proven pathway here for growth. That has worked out tremendously for us. At the end of the day, it is extremely difficult to teach brand new people a job that you currently don't have anybody doing at a high level. You need to go find somebody and splurge on them, because more than likely they're going to end up running that department and teaching those people that follow behind them. So that is going to be the most important hire if that department ends up working for you.
I love that. We could do a whole episode on that, but yeah, investing in cold calling, specifically with your first couple, they have to have been there. It's probably going to hurt paying that bill. It's worth it. Cole, what about you?
I'm going to double down on what I said. Figuring out what your prospect's value is and making sure each time you come to a call, you're coming to that call with value, right? That means every cold call you have, you're coming with value, not yours, theirs. Your goal is to get an appointment. Their goal is to understand why that appointment matters. And that's the piece of the cold call that matters the most. Taking time to really understand your client and your buyer and what's most impactful to them. And it's not always buying your service. It's about what's going to impact their day, what's going to make them better at their job, what's going to make them better in their role. And if you could speak to that on a cold call, you'll get every appointment.
I love that. And I think we could probably have a whole episode on that as well. But this notion of value exchange, that can be as simple as making them laugh, making them think about something. I think it's based on who they, what makes them tick. Why are they in this position? Why should they care about what you're saying? Are you more concerned about getting a set because you got to hit a number? Or is this person actually somebody who would buy this service from you? Do you believe that? And if you do believe that, great. Work back from there. Come up with a way to demonstrate that value to them so it's clear and obvious that it makes total sense for you to meet with us. This is absolutely something you want to do. The bit of wisdom I would leave is don't sleep on cold calling as a skill. You're going to have top performers who are going to say, yeah, but I convert better on email. Yeah, but I close more deals coming from LinkedIn. Great. Most football players, they're not doing the drills they do in football camp on the field, right? All the conditioning that athletes do, like the different kinds of passing, whatever, none of that is actual tactical, that's used in the actual game, but all of it's necessary to condition. Cold calling is a conditionary tool. Not only does it convert, it still brings in deals, but it makes your team better. It sets a culture of, yeah, we do hard things here. Selling is hard. Cold calling is hard. That's part of it. That's the culture we want here. We want people who aren't afraid to cold call, who aren't afraid to knock on a door and be comfortable in that situation, because sales is hard. It's meant to be challenging. You have to persuade someone. You have to persuade people on the other side of the world who then have to persuade other people inside their organization to buy not just your product, but to not choose all the other products you're spending huge marketing dollars and all these things, right? So like sales is not just, hey, a Chick-fil-A menu. Would you happen to want to buy from me? It's like, no, it's hard and it should be hard. And cold calling to me is at the root of that. When you embrace that, like, yeah, I do hard things. I cold call. I'm not afraid of it. That will spill over into every other thing you do. The kind of detail and focus you put in your proposals, in your demos, the way that you approach your work balance, right? Is, yeah, this is hard. Hard things are worth it, right? And so don't run away from the hard things. Embrace the hard things.
Well said.
Okay, gentlemen, this is episode 1 of the Under Oath podcast. For those who want to ask us any specific questions, you have something in your particular revenue function that you'd like our perspective on, we'd love to hear feedback from you. We'll have ways to reach out to the show in the notes, or you can reach out on any socials, of course. And then if you know somebody or are somebody who was deep in the trenches, whether you're a frontline seller, manager, leader, in whatever capacity, and would like to chat with us about revenue, take the stand, we'd love to hear from you as well. I really got to get a gavel so that I can say
First and last episode without it.
First and last episode of that court adjourned.
Oh, the courtroom's buzzing, the stakes are high. Promises shimmer like stars in the sky. But a sale built on trust, oh, that's the flair. Honesty sells, beware the snare. Under oath, you gotta keep it true. Win their hearts with what you do, not just the clothes